Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abi.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
We're back from Colorado.
Woo!
We went to Colorado and we almost got to watch a Monday Night Football game.
Although we didn't. And it's basically
Preseason.
because preseason football. Is it really even a football game?
I don't know. I mean, like...
It crushes your hopes and dreams when your preseason team loses, though. Because you're like, if we can't win against your backup team, then...
Come on, Bronx. Let's do this.
We need some help.
That's real.
We need a lot of prayers.
Yeah, we do. Well,
Do you know why Tim Tebow worked? Is because everybody was praying for him. That's why it was good having the Broncos. The Broncos need your prayers.
All the prayers
guys.
they can get. Yeah. So, while we're in Colorado, we got to visit your
My bestie.
Mm-hmm.
She's my best friend.
Someone that we all know here on the podcast,
Peetsy.
old Peetsy, and you guys got some time.
We recorded a podcast that is going to be so good that we're releasing this.
Well, we'll judge that when the
Gonna
time
be
comes.
so good.
You're
just jealous because you weren't in it.
I wasn't in it because I was.
Because you didn't care.
I didn't care.
No, actually, that's not the truth. We only had 2 microphones.
We did, and I saw my way out of that. I was like, I don't need to be part of this anyways. Yeah. You guys go banter. Mm-hmm. But it was fun getting to be there. Actually, one of my favorite parts was Peetsy's kids.
Oh, they're so cute.
I know, they were absolutely delightful.
I think we might need to steal them.
I actually may have.
Oh, they're in like our...
I abducted Moses.
And where'd you put him?
Little Momo is crazy. He has this intense thing where he's got 2 extremes. He's like this intense love and giggles everywhere. And then he's like freaks out and he's throwing himself on the ground.
Oh, he feels everything at level 10.
Uh-huh.
There's like no level 0 emotions. No level 5 emotions. It's like he does not have an emotional regulator, which no kid does. But.
Right. And he's 2.5 now?
Yeah.
And he's so friggin' cute. Like right now, he could get away with murder.
You would let him get away with murder.
I would, because I'm like, you're adorable. It's okay that you murdered your entire family.
Okay, so one of my favorite things about Momo is that he does intense love. That's what Peetsy calls it, which is the best term for it.
He's like exploding with emotions of love and
you
prayer.
can tell that it's like he has so much emotions on the inside, he doesn't know what to do with them. So he'll come and he'll put his hand on both sides of your face and he will like grab your face and it looks like he's gonna like hurt you. It looks like he's angry at you and he'll squint his eyes real tight and then he'll just smile and it's like he's pushing all of his love that he has in his whole body into you.
He totally feels like he's trying to push love into your soul.
Yeah, and then he'll like nuzzle your nose
and then he
or
grabs
he'll
your
like
ears and pulls on them.
Yes.
But one of the things that I love about Momo is he still has his childlike wonder.
Yeah.
And I think the segues, it segues massively into a pretty heavy topic that we're going to jump into today.
My favorite thing is we always pick a random thing to talk about in the beginning and somehow your brain finds a way to segue it into we're talking about.
So kids they have their innocence and their childlike wonder and they love life. They're fully connected to life. Like you said, Momo, he's like, he fully feels love and he fully feels sadness.
And he fully feels joy.
And before life suddenly happens to us as kids, where all chaos, craziness, bullies, whatever the thing is that creates pain, before that pain happens to us, we're just living.
Yeah.
And we're liking life. We want to be here on planet Earth.
Yes.
But then like... for some people, specifically us, and
specifically me and you, there's this detour to life where childlike innocence starts to fall away and crumble, and all of a sudden there's this moment where you go, I don't know that I want to be here. I don't know that I like this, and that's not universally for all people. But we have a history of battling with suicide, and September happens to be Suicide Awareness Month. And we felt like this would be a really good time to have this conversation.
Yeah.
About a year ago, I wrote a blog.
Yeah, you wrote a blog and it was so good.
And it got, in our little small community of people, it felt like it kind of
got shared thousands and thousands of times.
Maybe, I don't know if it's that much, but it got shared a lot, and it definitely got a lot of likes on it. And it was a first time publicly I really came out and broke down some of the realities of my suicidal battle.
Yeah.
Because it's an issue that is shrouded in so much shame.
Yeah.
That people are terrified to talk about it. And then there's the other side of the people who are terrified to hear about a conversation.
They don't know.
Exactly.
They don't understand it.
I don't understand it. I don't know what to do with this. Do I call 911 because
Right.
you're sharing this? Where do I posture myself?
Yeah. One of the things I loved about your blog so much is people responded saying it's the first time they could understand, they could relate, they could have empathy and compassion for people who struggled with that. Because I think if you've never struggled with it, it's hard to get. If that's just not how your brain processes.
Because I've actually talked to people when I've shared about my suicidal history, and they were like, I've never thought of dying.
Yeah. Which for us was like, I don't even know what it'd be like to have not thought about dying.
Totally. And I think that, what's the show on Netflix? Is it 11 Reasons Why?
13
Reasons Why? Is that what it is? I made a mistake of that before. And I watched a little bit of it, but it's a conversation the public wants to have. And I don't know if they know how to have the conversation.
Yeah, I don't know that it was a great way
I don't
to have
think it
the
was,
conversation, but we need to be talking about mental health. So we're going to share our personal journeys about mental health in this podcast.
Yeah. And I think it's key to know that we don't have all the answers. We're not experts on the subject. We're experts on ourselves.
Yep.
And I can tell you from an expert opinion about what I went through. And it's an invitation to explore maybe your own world that some of you are listening and go, oh, yeah, that relates to me or that doesn't. But also for those of you who are listening who have never been exposed to these conversations and have never felt suicidal, it's an invitation, like Abby said, to compassion and to explore with questions maybe what other people are battling. And
to get used to talking and hearing about it so that it's not taboo for you when you have to have a conversation.
Yeah. And also I'd like to say this, when we look at society at large, when we have put a spotlight on it, it's been when maybe someone like Robin Williams kills himself, or Chester Bennington from Linkin Park, or and a lot of those, and people are like, oh my gosh, how do we deal with this? And I know that one of my good friends talked about the idea of in his pain process of processing one of these people's deaths, he said it felt really, very, how do you put it? Selfish what this person did. And then a lot of people gave him a lot of heat, like, how could you say it was selfish? But there's a mixed balance between the reality of like, I have pain and my mom and I'm in a lot of pain and there needs to be compassion for that. And then there's also a reality check of like, people love me. And there's a ripple effect to me making a decision to exit Earth prematurely. And that's a scary conversation to even have. Like, is that selfish? How do I affect people? Does my life really matter? And that's a question early on that I battled with was, does my life really matter? Do people care about my pain? And in the end, people really do. But if we do exit the earth through suicide, we don't actually get to participate in seeing the actual love that was available anyways.
So let's start with me and you, our personal story.
Yeah. So again, we're trying to approach a subject that could feel really heavy and approach it at a mid-level balanced place where we can have an open dialogue.
Well, it doesn't feel heavy for me at all because we have actually had so much personal breakthrough, both of us.
Yeah.
That it feels like telling a part of our story that can give hope to people. So I don't think it feels heavy because it feels hopeful.
Yeah, totally. So why don't you go ahead and share some of your journey?
Okay. I was one of those kids who doesn't remember not thinking about wanting to die. I think the first time I thought about wanting to die, I was around 7. Now, my mom was the same way. She actually, I think, wanted to die when she was around 3. And then, so I think there are some generational things that can happen like that. Trauma gets passed down. But also, I grew up in a family where my mom, I was aware my mom wanted to die all the time. And I was aware that she was suicidal. And it was very heavy as a kid.
Yeah.
It created a lot of high stakes mentality for me. Like, if I don't figure out how to keep mom happy, she's gone. And so it felt like a lot of pressure for me to perform and to be good enough and to whatever. And so what ended up happening is I think I internalized that pressure. And I had this feeling for me in my family where I was the miracle child. My parents tried for years to have kids. They had several miscarriages and I was the only child that they could actually have. And then my mom and dad, so they aimed a lot of their life at me.
Right.
But then there was not an ability to make them happy. My mom, if I would have understood mental illness, I think I would have been able to detach a little bit, because I honestly believed that if I was good enough, I could fulfill my parents. I could make them happy.
Yeah.
I could complete them. I could pull them out of depression. I could whatever. And so I remember this feeling of I should be able to be enough, because my mom would say, you're my source of joy. You're the only reason I'm alive. You're the only thing that's worth being here for.
That's so much pressure.
So much pressure. And so what happened is I would feel the pressure, and on one hand I'd be like, I can do this. Because, and there's a little bit of like ego that even comes, I can do this. I can make you happy.
Yeah.
I can play the game. I can figure out what you need. I can become what you need. But then there was this knowing underneath the whole time, there's no way that I can be enough for you. Like there's this inner level of truth.
Yeah.
And that felt so hopeless to me. The idea that I will never be able to do this thing I think I should be able to do. Mm-hmm. So I will always be a failure, and we will always be stuck here, and my family will always be a mess because I can't be enough to get them. And so what happened for me is, again, I think I could have just been depressed or hopeless without suicide if it wasn't that kind of like I think my mom, it's almost like my mom was friends with death and suicide.
Right.
As a way that it was her coping skill, was always thinking if I could escape, then I would be okay.
Yeah.
And so I think often what happens as kids is we meet our parents' coping skills, whether it's anger or hopelessness or disassociating or whatever it is that is their coping skill, or fun for some people. We meet their coping skills, and it's natural for us to become friends with them, because as kids, we think our parents, like who they're friends with, we could be friends with.
Totally.
So I think I would have definitely been hopeless and depressed, but the connection to death, I think, really was from being in an environment around it. But I don't remember thinking that as a kid. I never knew that as a kid. I never thought, oh, this is normal because mom's like this. I just remember thinking I wanted to die. And I didn't think I'm like my mom. Like, even though I felt the same way.
Yeah, I never thought, oh, this is just mom stuff.
Yeah, I didn't think that. And
right.
I also didn't think like we both struggle with the same thing. That never crossed my mind. And for me, it was something, because I learned to be the adult and to be powerful, and I shoved so many emotions down. I disassociated in a lot of my childhood because of a lot of scenarios that I was put in that were too big for me. So what I did was I felt like I had to be strong all the time. Like, mom can't handle something else fragile. Yeah. She's already fragile. So I need to be strong all the time. And this is where suicide became a very secret thing for me. So I don't know that lots of people, I don't think lots of people knew.
Right. Yeah. Nobody knew about my stuff.
Yeah. My spiritual parents, who I have are some of the best humans on the planet, were like, we had no idea you were in that much pain. And I think it was because I had learned that I need to be okay,
right,
or else the whole world's going to break.
Yeah.
So that is where it started for me. It started around 7. It grew to where I thought about wanting to die hundreds of times a day. It is no longer like that. And we're both going to share kind of like what brought breakthrough to us, but I just wanted to start with that's where it started for me.
Yeah. And inside of my household, my mom also had a strong battle with suicide. Mm-hmm. Now, she didn't try to commit suicide in front of me. There was none of that action, but she had a history of that. And it may have been spoken about, but I think a lot of it was unspoken. Didn't realize it till maybe later on in life, where she dialogued more about her battles of wanting to commit suicide and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, very similar, like, hey, you're exposed in an environment as that's
an option.
A normal.
Even if it's the energy, the emotional energy that someone's carrying, you can feel something in that space that you don't register with your logical mind.
And I don't think no kids are taught you are feeling what's going on with the people around you.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to absorb it and think it's you.
Yeah. And I think that's real. I know that for me, we've talked openly many times about some of the craziness inside of my house, the aggression, the intensity. For me as a kid, I battled this deep level of hopelessness, feeling like this experience is happening to me and there's not anything I can do to change it. So it was like, if I cried, I got in more trouble. If I didn't cry, it was still trouble.
Trouble.
It didn't matter.
Like, I'm going to be punished. I'm going to be hurt. I'm going to be unprotected. I'm going to be unloved no matter what.
And so what it felt like was there is no alternative options to being heard, to being understood, and to processing my pain. So here is an overload of pain as a young person. And I think even in reality, looking back as an adult, there wasn't anyone in my near vicinity that was safe to even, no one asked me questions. How are you actually doing? What's going on? When I was asked questions of how are you doing? We've talked about my grandmother before, but I remember she was like, oh, how was Justin? How was his day? And I'd tell her about how I got bullied at school. And she would go, oh, poor Justin has such a tough life. Look at me. I'm Justin. I have a tough life. Well, kids in Africa have it worse, Justin.
Totally.
And so there was this thing inside of me as a child where I'm like, oh, there is no way at all to process this pain. I wouldn't use that language, but something was...
You didn't know that.
I didn't know that, but I do remember having a thought, if I could kill myself, then they would know how much pain I'm in.
Then they'd know how I'm being hurt.
How bad it's hurting. They would have a reality to that. And I would go into medicative ideations, thinking over and over again about how I'd kill myself. And then I'd imagine people's sadness.
Right.
I'd imagine people like their response to why didn't we listen and things like that.
So really you came up with an imagination where you got comforted. You were, because the end of that ideation is that people loved me and had compassion on me.
Yep. Absolutely. And so that was my escapism. So my solution to feeling deeply powerless and out of control was to find my power in creating a world where I had all the power. I had the power to leave the situation and I had the power to convince people finally about the pain I was in.
Yeah. And I think that is a lot of people who struggle with depression and suicide is they have a lot of pain on the inside. And it's one of those things. It's a almost like an illness. It's not, but like it's something's going on inside of you, but nobody can see it. And so somehow I think that people think about self-harm or suicide as a way that they can finally have integration where what they're experiencing on the inside people can see on the outside. And what I have found to be true, just wanting to talk about this, is there is actually so much healing when what's going on the inside and what's going on the outside are the same.
Are aligned.
Yeah. Like there's integration, but you don't actually have to do suicide to align those. Totally. Like I've actually gotten good at communicating my pain with people. So what is on the inside and what is on the outside matches, but then where I get the comfort that I'm really looking for.
Yeah. I think about a little bit of my own history with this journey. Now for me, there were about 2 times where I was genuinely close to killing myself and going down that rabbit hole. But prior to that, again, it was just a medicative state. Yeah. And a lot of people, I just want to bring this up and kind of define, or I don't know, put language to this. A lot of people will talk about being suicidal, but they're not legitimately suicidal.
Well, let me word it differently. I was thinking about this.
Yeah, I'm trying to get some language for it.
I'd say there's 2 kinds of suicidal.
Right.
One is an ideation of it, which is like it's a way I escape, but I'm not actually going to kill myself.
Right. It's medicative.
Yes. So it's like I would imagine going to heaven. I call it like Christian suicidal, where you're like, I just want to be in heaven and not here. And I wasn't actually at that part of my life ever going to kill myself.
Right.
And I will say this, the wonderful thing is, one of the things that kept me was knowing that it would hurt people around me.
Right.
That was one of the reasons that I was like, I couldn't do this to the people around me.
Yeah.
It would kill them.
And then you have the other side of the coin where there's this
plan.
There's a plan in place, and I'm going to create attempts. And in some of those attempts are cries for help. And people actually talk about, I mean, I had a friend in my teenage years who took a bottle of pills.
Yeah.
And they were like Tylenol. And it wasn't like enough that it was going to kill the person. And, was it because they just didn't think it through well in their teenage mind that wasn't enough, or was it a cry for help? But I think in retrospect, in some conversations I had heard around it, that it was really like, I just needed someone to know.
Yeah.
And then there's the I'm trying to find language for it. Then there's people who are like, no, I'm determined to do this. And that what's scary about it is how do you can't tell. You can't tell. How do I tell like where you're actually at in this? Is this real? Is it not real?
I often ask people if they're talking to me about it.
How real is this? Yeah. Is this like, oh, I feel medicated, or is it like, no, I feel like I have to get out of here? And so anyways, but for me, it was only 2 different times really where I was really close to the reality of that. And I might share, would you like me to share my...
Go ahead and share your college experience.
Well, in college, it was my first year of college at the University of Montana, and I was actually incredibly depressed. One thing that I grew up with was what I call the what's the point monster.
Yeah.
And that's usually when you feel unable to make an impact or a difference in your circumstances, especially you learn, it's learned powerlessness as a kid. Mm-hmm. You decide like, what's the point? Then why am I here? I can't make an impact on my own life. It will continue to happen to me.
Yeah. Like there's nothing I can change.
Yeah. And so there was that deep powerless programming in my mind. Mm-hmm. And I remember in my first year of college, feeling super hopeless, not knowing what am I going to do with my future. Even if I dream of something, I can't make it happen because life just happens to you. And so I decided I was going to go get my gun and check it out. And I don't know what college campuses are like nowadays. It's way more rough to have guns on them, but we were able in Montana to have guns back then. Yeah. I was going down to get my gun. And right before I went down to get my gun, I had a brief pause, and I was like, and now I grew up in a historically a faith family.
Yeah.
But the application of that relationship with unconditional love wasn't present. Like that healing and reality wasn't there. So I was just like, religion is all bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's not real. And I had the idea was inside of me, I believe that God is real, but I don't know what God really looks like in the clutter of all this mess.
Yeah, totally.
And as I was about to go get my gun, I suddenly went, God, I don't actually want to die. I could feel this thing deep out inside me. I don't want to die. But then I was like, but I can't live like this anymore. I don't want to live this way, this weightiness, this heaviness of sadness and depression that I had no tools for in order to process out.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I was basically like, so I need you to be real. I need you to be tangible. Otherwise this is done. And I felt this warm, loving, energy, presence of love. I mean, there's no other way to describe it.
God.
I felt God, and I felt the presence of God around me. And then that's when I fell to my knees on the ground and just went fetal in my dorm room. And for the next, I don't know how many hours, I'm just sob crying. Yeah, maybe spit and tears all over. And I'm just in this puddle, and I'm shaking, and I'm like, I just don't want to be like this anymore. And I could feel this love overtaking me. And it felt like this personal encounter that was saying, hey, it doesn't have to be like this. We can change things.
Yes.
And do I think it had to come to that level of like, I'm going to kill myself in order to experience that? No, but it just so happened that I think my will decided to bend.
Well, and you finally asked.
Yeah, there was an invitation of like, it was the first time it wasn't, I want out of this, I feel hopeless. It was like, no, I genuinely want out of this. Is there an option?
Yeah.
And so that began a journey for me that began, that was like, it was like the rudder on my ship started to shift towards finding life.
Yeah.
And then that played a role long-term as I began to work out of that.
And I think that love is ultimately what has healed so much of your soul that was in that place. And that really love is the answer for anybody who's trapped there.
Right. And I think that, like, what is love? What does love look like?
Sure.
Love felt really toxic to me. It was, there was like in one moment angry and aggressive, and the next moment it cared about you. It like had two sides to it.
Yeah.
I couldn't see what love was, but it did propel me into a journey of going, all right, God, if you're real, what do you look like?
Yeah.
Where do I find truth? What does truth look like? And it really led me into the journey of asking what love practically looks like. I remember the one of the few scriptures at that point out of biblically that I had to like memorize from my childhood going to like some church camp or something was John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, so on and so forth. But I remember that flashed in my mind, for God so loved the world. And I remember that began a journey. The word love was highlighted to me, and it was an invitation of like, what does love actually look like?
Yeah.
And what does it look like toward myself and towards others? And what does it look like to receive love? And so it began this journey of opening my heart to the possibility of love. And the reason I talk about this is for people who are in suicidal ideation or tendencies or whatever, at the core of them, the question is, does my life actually matter? Am I loved? And if I am loved, like, how does that play out? Can things change? Yeah. And so that's a deep question inside of us.
Yeah. And I think like you didn't have an answer to all of that, but you did encounter love.
I did.
And it began changing you.
And it began to change me.
Yeah.
But it began with not only the willingness, but then a yes. There was a buy-in. I was like, yes, I'm willing to go on this exploration journey and see where it leads.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, so as I grew older, when I was 12, I got a hormone problem. And everybody emails me and they're like, I wonder if I have that hormone problem. So if I bled all of the time and had constant PMS and hormone problems. So if that wasn't you, you don't have to email me and see if you had the same thing. They're just like, oh, I have crazy emotions too. We probably have the same thing. But so I started when I was 12 having crazy emotions. And I would say it was like, very similar to mental illness, where extreme emotions on whatever side it was, anger, sadness, depression, hopelessness, and then just so many physical side effects. And then I was in a car wreck. And so there was just, I remember looking at my life feeling so broken. Physically, I was broken. Emotionally, I was broken. And I didn't understand that I was in a lot of pain from what was happening in my childhood. I didn't understand that most of what I did was the way that I dealt with pain as a kid is I internalized it.
Yeah.
So any pain that happened, I took out on me. Like, I must be a failure. I hate myself. I am not enough. Instead of being able to be like, oh yeah, that's painful.
Yeah.
And so I'm having this thing where my body didn't work and my emotions are intensely tormented, and there's a lot of pain in my family. And so for me, I remember I kind of want to talk about several different stages of breakthrough. I think one of the first stages for me of breakthrough was getting more honest with people in my life.
Yeah.
So I had a guy friend who I could be really honest that how deep I was struggling.
About suicide or about life in general?
Actually, about life in general. That began to lessen, because just not carrying the pain alone began to it wasn't like he fixed me. He didn't have great advice. And then there's more than just that one. I just remember the first time talking to somebody.
Yeah.
And it began to lessen. It's not, again, it didn't take it all away, but it just began the process. Pain carried in community is so much less heavy.
That's a good way to put it.
Than carried by ourselves.
Pain carried in community is so much lessened, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said less heavy, but either way.
Less heavy.
Yeah.
And really, yeah.
And they actually say that like verbal ventilation, that's a scientific term for verbally processing and letting out what's on the inside is a scientific way that you need to be able to heal. Yeah. So keeping it all on the inside locks you up.
Which was my entire childhood.
Yeah.
And for me, as well as you for a huge portion of it, I have no one to talk to.
Yeah.
So now I just feel overwhelmed by a mountain that wants to swallow me alive.
Or I feel shame. Like I felt so much shame about being broken because I back then I was just so different in life, but I really felt like I should have everything together.
Yeah.
And so the shame of saying like, I'm so broken. I'm so screwed up. Like I just could remember feeling like I am so much more screwed up than everybody else.
Yeah.
I am so like, I'm just so like, and if I tell people, it's funny because it's like, if I tell people, then they'll know, which is a funny thing. Like if I pretend I'm not screwed up, they won't know. It's not even real. Like people feel you even
totally
no matter what. So you might as well just get it out.
Yeah. And just be honest with yourself.
Yeah. And with them.
The world around you.
That was probably the first step for me to beginning a transformation. And I don't know that we'll have time to go into it, but I know that that is a part of your story as well. The second time that you were close to killing yourself, you getting it out and letting people into that place was a part of your healing journey.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to share that at some point if you want or not.
Yeah. I don't know what we'll have time for, but yeah.
Okay.
So, that was probably the first step of my healing process. And then I remember I went to, for me, this is we try to keep this podcast where whatever faith you are, you can listen to it and glean good things, hopeful for your life and relationships. But we just have to tell our personal stories in this one. And so, we get to tell our personal stories. So for me, I grew up in the church and I went to summer camp every year. And I remember just being so at the end of myself. And sometimes it had to do even with like the physical suffering I was in. The idea of not being in suffering anymore sounded so appealing. And so I remember going and it was kind of like that same prayer, like, God, I don't know what, like, I can't keep doing this. Like I'm at the end of myself. And we ended up having this prayer time where I don't even know what started. I don't even know how it happened. It's like all a blur, but like pretty much for like 2 hours, I like cried and people prayed for me. And it was a pretty radical encounter where I could feel like the battle of love versus the lies that I believed. Like I could actually tangibly in my body feel the battle of it. And then could feel eventually like love winning out for it. And so, and I think I had processed with the people like about suicide and death, my connection to death in that prayer time. And so I thought, oh great, it's like done. I'm good. Like that love like changed me. I'm good, I thought. Mm-hmm. And so I come back from camp and immediately I want to die again. And I'm like, this doesn't work. This love prayer stuff, it does not work. And so I went to my pastor and I was like, I explained the scenario that had happened, the experience that I had had, and then how nothing changed. And he was like, oh yeah, Abby, you have a habit in your mind. Like you have a habit and you have to break the habit. And the picture I always explain this to people. The picture I thought of was like, if you had 5 feet of snow all over your yard and, you have to plow a pathway to get to your car, but there is a pathway that's already plowed that goes the longest way around your house to get to your car. Well, it's actually so much easier to walk on a plowed pathway than it is to walk through 5 feet of snow. So it'd be like, I'm naturally going to want to just take the plowed pathway, even if it's longer, to get to where I want to go. And so I think that's like the vision I have of my mind. I had a plowed pathway between anything that caused me pain and wanting to die.
Yeah.
So in my brain, I didn't even consciously choose to think of death at that point in my life. Like by that point in my life, it could be like, I'm stuck in traffic. I want to die. It could be like, this person gave me a look. I don't know if they're interested in the story I'm telling. I want to die. Like it became, our brains are like this. our brains are fascinating, but they create pathways that we go over and over and over again, that we track over and over again, so that we don't have to consciously be thinking all the time. It's like a shortcut. It's trying to create shortcuts. It's kind of like our iPhone, how you can pick your favorites to be at the bottom, your favorite apps, because it's a shortcut to it. That's what your brain does. It does shortcuts to what you think about. So I recognized that I was going to have to change the shortcut for me to not be about death. And it was really hard in the beginning because my feelings lined up with my thoughts. So it was, I want to die, and I felt it. And I just had to, for the sake of, I want to get out of this. I don't want to be in this battle forever. Be like, no, I don't. I just said no. That was all I could get out of my mouth or thoughts was just no. I want to die. No, I want to die. No. Now I thought it hundreds of times a day. So it was like
a lot of no's.
It was a lot of no's. And then I would say that was like months of me doing that. And then it became, I had more power because the longer I said no, it's like every time I said no, it was like me stopping walking down that path that was snow plowed. And then me choosing to create a new snow plowed path, where it's like the more you choose a different path in your brain, it begins creating a new rut in your brain so that you have a new normal that your brain can choose subconsciously.
Yeah.
So I want to die. No, I want to die. No. Then it became, I want to die. No, I don't. Just those 2 extra words were really hard, but it was more of a stance. I want to die. No, I don't. Again, I didn't feel it when I started, and I can tell you story after story in my life how part of the way torment has gotten broke for me is feeling my feelings, acknowledging them, validating them, but then choosing thoughts before I feel new feelings.
Totally.
So I want to die. No, I don't. Then it became, I want to die. No, I don't. Like I actually didn't. Where I was like, no, I actually don't.
Yeah.
And then it became, I want to die. No, I want to live. No, I want to live. And then it became a thought. I tell people this, there's different intimacy that we have with thoughts. So like some thoughts are our best friends and they just hang out with us and we don't even think about them. They're
just there with us all the time.
They're with us all the time. And then there's other thoughts that are strangers and we just let them pass by. My spiritual mom that I grew up with, I use the term spiritual mom because they're like my second parents. I guess that'd be a better way to say it. My second parents.
Yeah.
I wasn't technically, but they consider me adopted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, she used to explain it like thoughts are like birds that fly over your head. You're going to think all kinds of thoughts. Like I have crazy thoughts sometimes where I'll think like, what is the most insane thing I could do right now?
Strip off all my clothes and run up on stage and dance around. Why would I ever do that?
Totally. It's not even like I'm going to, but I have crazy thoughts. So sometimes. And so I always think of that like they're just birds that fly over.
Mm-hmm.
And then they fly over. If you let them nest, that's when it creates problems.
Right. When they land and
when they land on your head and then you give them space
you begin to medicate on them and go, yeah, let me think on this more and more. And you build a place for them to live.
So for me, when I originally was like, I want to die, that was like a best friend thought.
Yeah.
And every time I disconnected, it was like me breaking friendship with this concept. So I kept pushing them out of my friendship circles farther and farther until there was a time when I heard I want to die. And I thought, that's like a stranger. That's just a stranger walking by. That's not me. Yeah. I don't feel that way.
That didn't feel like it was wrapped into your being. It didn't
Nope.
feel part of your DNA at a cellular level. I know.
Yeah.
As a side note for me too, suicide felt like it was who I was.
Yeah.
Not something that was there that could be gotten rid of.
Totally.
I remember early on at one point, I think I was talking to you about it, but I was like, I couldn't imagine a life where suicide wasn't a part of my normal feeling and being. So it felt written into the fibers of my being.
Absolutely.
And what you're talking about is like, no, it's not who you are. It's not part of your life, whether that's suicide, hopelessness, depression.
Yeah.
It may feel very
Shame,
much like
fear.
Like an intimate friend, but you can actually break that friendship, divorce it, and decide that it's not going to be part of your world. And like now in my life, if I were to feel that, I'd be like, that feels so foreign.
Yeah, this doesn't feel like me.
That's not who I am. That's not how my life is. I love my life, right?
Yeah. And so for me, I do just want to say this, that took about 4 years for me to go on that process.
And when you think about it, that developed over what, 10, 15 years?
That was at least 15 years.
At least 15 years
that I had been
medicating on
that thought over
suicidal
and over and over again.
Imagination, ideation.
And so 4 years is actually pretty remarkable to plow a new pathway that became a new normal.
I think that even what you're saying in that is the reality is that you aren't powerless to something that you're feeling. And whether, again, you guys can apply this who maybe don't have suicidal ideations and stuff in your world, you can apply this all over your life.
Yeah.
You actually have power over the darkest, heaviest, craziest things in your life, and you get to rewire and decide how you're going to live.
Yeah.
And so it's an empowerment conversation at any level.
And you get to decide what you want to be your normal friend feelings, like your feelings that are friends. So my normal one used to be depression and suicide, and now I would say it's much more like peace.
Yeah. At the core of do you mind if I jump in here?
Yeah, go ahead.
At the core of my suicidal ideation was the sense of abandonment. And the more that you stay in it and don't share, because first off, not sharing my pain made me feel alone and abandoned. And that made me feel really helpless.
Yeah.
And it made me feel unseen, unknown. And it made me feel unloved. And like, I'm just taking different steps in this of what that looked like for me. But at the core of it, the longer you choose to stay trapped in it, you're not alone. The truth is you're not alone. But I know that people who are in it are convinced that I am alone.
Yeah.
No, you're not. There's tons of people that would love you and care about you and talk to you about this if you would step out of it.
Yeah.
But the lie that suicide helps to perpetuate, or suicidal ideation even, is no, I'm your best friend. I'm all you have.
Yeah. The suicide is saying that to you.
Right. If you imagine suicide as a person in the way that you're talking about, personifying suicide as emotion as a person.
Depression, hopelessness, powerlessness.
This person basically says, nope, you don't have any other option. I'm all you have. I'm your only way out. And you're like, oh, I guess so. I guess I don't have anyone but you. I guess this is all I have. And you actually invest trust into something that only wants to destroy you.
Yeah.
Rather than trust in the possibilities that there is a love that wants to heal you out there.
Yeah.
Some people aren't trustworthy, true, but there is actually love that exists that wants to meet with you and wants to heal you.
Yep.
And why would you want to trust something? When I have conversations with people, why would you want to trust something that its only goal is to destroy you and decide that it's the thing that loves you?
Yeah.
And again, whether that's suicide, hopelessness, depression, it's not there to help you.
Yeah.
So anyways, I thought I might share a little bit. Do you feel comfortable with me sharing the other time that I almost committed suicide? So later on, we were a couple of years into marriage, and I noticed that suicidal ideations had started kicking up inside of me. We were in a season of life where you were working, I wasn't working, and I didn't know that I was having emotional flashbacks from PTSD.
Totally.
But I was in emotional flashbacks and feeling alone and abandoned, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And all of a sudden, this hopelessness started creeping in that I hadn't had. Like, when we first got married, I actually started cultivating coming alive, being thankful for life. And I felt very much like, oh, life feels great. I'm not powerless and stuff like that. But this season actually cultivated an upbringing of this past stuff.
Yeah.
And so as it begins to come up, I start feeling a lot of shame about it. I'm like, as I'm starting to go, I just want to die. I don't know why I'm here. What's the purpose of my life? What's the point? Monster has been creeping back in. And so it started building steam. And I remember it was getting so bad. There were days where I felt like this deep sadness and screaming inside of me as you would pass me by in the hallway. You're going off to work or something. And I wanted to grab you and be like, I am dying internally and I want to kill myself so bad and I don't know what's happening. But it's like I couldn't break the barrier of shame over my mouth. And I was terrified of what that might provoke inside of you. I was terrified that you would freak out.
You knew that what I'd grown up in.
I knew what you had grown up in. I didn't want to put that on you. And so I was feeling this deep trappings in it. And so one day while I was at home, I got a rope and I created a noose. And I went and hung it in the garage, and I'm standing on a ladder, and in one hand I had a knife to cut myself down,
And as I got up on the ladder, I hung the noose around my neck and I made this decision. I was like, I'm either going to jump off today and end my life, or I'm going to choose to cut myself down and choose to actually like get out of this somehow. Mm-hmm. Like there was this war within that's like, make a decision. I can't take the exhaustion of wanting to die all the time. It felt like this war that was just waging inside of me that I was so exhausted by.
Yeah.
And so as tears are dropping down my face, again, similar to that earlier experience that I had, I was like, I don't want to die. I'm going to choose out of this. And I cut the rope. I put the ladder away, hid everything before you got home and our roommate got home for the evening. A couple days later, as I was just processing this, and I was like, I have to tell them about me like putting a rope around my neck.
Yeah.
But I was like, how do I get it out of me? Like I want to live. I want to get out of this, but it feels so heavy. And there was this moment where you and I were in a pretty aggressive, I don't know, would you call it a fight? And you had said... Confrontation. You had said, I'm leaving.
Yeah. And I just meant like out the door.
Right. Like I'm going to walk out of the door, out of the house and get space.
Yeah.
And it immediately brought me all the way back to my childhood.
Mm-hmm. Sent you into an emotional flashback.
And an emotional flashback of when my mom would say, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I've been on the brink of wanting to kill myself for the last month. And
now I'm going to be alone.
And now I'm actually going to be alone. She's finally leaving me. Yeah. And it was real.
So you thought I was like leaving.
I actually thought you were leaving.
Yeah.
And so
which this is what happens in triggers.
Yeah.
Is miscommunications happen so easily where I think I'm saying something that's innocent and clear and he hears something completely different.
Absolutely. And it's sad because had I known I had complex PTSD at the time, I would have known like, oh, the emotions that I'm feeling are an emotional flashback. Yep. And it's not real.
Yep.
I just feel like I'm a kid again who's like having someone abandon him. But in that moment, I got crazy and I wanted to...
P.S. You don't have to have complex PTSD to have emotional flashbacks. I just want to say that. Like, this is just emotional health for everybody. Like, whether you had trauma in your childhood or not, you have emotional flashbacks. It's another way to say triggers. Every human has them and they show up.
And so in my inability to my inability to choose past my shame previous to this moment, I all of a sudden act out, and I act out in this crazy manner, and I run and I grab the gun, my gun out of one of the storage place it was in, and I put it to the side of my head, and I'm like, fine, leave me. I'm going to kill myself. And in that moment, I watched as something shattered inside of you.
Yes.
But inside of me, like I could feel this thing inside of me screaming, see how bad it is.
Totally.
It's this bad.
Yeah.
I just want to get it off my shoulders, off my chest, the reality of what this is inside of me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I would invite you to have a voice in this if you'd like on.
Well, I mean, and this is also typical of triggers and situations, like that is not how I read what was happening at all. At all. I just thought you went into rage and were out of your mind and were going to kill us both.
Absolutely.
So like I didn't think, oh, you're sharing with me that you're suicidal.
No.
And I think this is pretty normal when we bury things for a long time.
Volcanic eruptions.
We have a volcanic eruption. And that's why the goal would be that we just get all of the secrets out on the table before they have to explode out on the table.
Just talk about it and go for it.
Because I think had you just told me you're struggling with suicide, there would have been so much compassion.
And instead of like at these moments where even I was concerned about how I might hurt her by telling her about it and stuff like that, I have now...
You hurt me way worse by not telling me.
I've created an actual PTSD moment.
Yeah. Totally.
I've created trauma for you that, and it's one of my saddest moments in my adult life.
Yeah.
And in my history in doing that with you. And one of the most, I don't carry shame about it anymore, but I would say it was one of the most shameful moments of my entire life, because I'd now brought someone who I deeply loved into my crazy and potentially communicated to them that they were in danger. Not only potentially, I did. I communicated
that wasn't what you're trying to communicate.
That there was no purpose inside of that. But now I communicated you're in a lot of danger around me. And so I know that in that moment I went into a shame attack and I buckled on the ground.
Yeah. Totally.
And I'm just shaking in tears.
Yeah.
And all you could do in a shattered, almost like, I see it like war when a grenade goes off and the person's just kind of like wandering around, just like, I don't know what just happened. My friend was blown to pieces.
Yes.
But you just kind of like sat down on the side of the bed and was like, basically, they're there. They're there.
Yeah.
Like, how do I survive what just happened? I don't even know. But the point to this is that there's some of you that have been bottling pain, that have been bottling maybe hiddenness of suicide or something else like that.
Or depression or anxiety.
Hopelessness or whatever.
Yeah. All mental illness. Lots of people have, not mental illness, sorry, mental issues. Lots of people have shame about whatever they're struggling with. And it's so common and normal to struggle. Anyway.
And you're creating the opportunity for way worse impact through a volcanic eruption than if you just said, hey, this is scary for me to say. This may be painful for you to hear. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just have to, rip open the door to this conversation, and it could get messy, but I want to do it now before it becomes something that could become volcanic.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have had to process through that a lot.
I think that, in this last season where we're processing trauma, I think it's still something that you have to process. I think that there's levels where you compartmentalize pieces of the reality of that pain in that situation for you.
But again, it wasn't because of what your heart was. It was because of how I experienced what was happening.
Yeah. And one of the things that Abby, I think you went into was like, I want to protect him from the shame that he has, and I don't want to talk about it myself. I don't know. I can't speak for you. How did you, I don't know how you dealt with that specifically.
I don't really remember in the moment what I did.
Right.
Yeah.
But
the idea was, I will say it did bring relief to you though.
Right.
You finally got known. We were able to have all the conversations we needed to have, which was, and I'm not endorsing that you did it that way. I'm just saying.
No, not at all.
I wanted to explain that like actually getting it out and sharing was, again, the same thing I said earlier.
Super relieving.
Pain carried in community is so much easier to handle.
And that relief could have come before the volcanic relief from it. It could have just been gradually bled out.
Could have come before you were in the garage.
Absolutely. It could have came way earlier, every moment.
And I would say this is so depression and anxiety and suicide and mental, really emotional issues, they always try to isolate you.
Yeah, everything's about isolation.
You're the only one.
No one else deals with this. If anyone really knew, they would think you're crazy. They would just reject you. They'd run from you.
Life.
Yeah, it'll destroy your career.
Whatever pain you've had so far will be worse if you let people know about this.
Yep, and that's again the lie. It's about it is always wanting to isolate you further and bring about death. And
it's connection. I mean, this is the connected life, but it's connection that brings healing and begins to empower us to get out and begins to invite love in instead of the accusation.
Totally. And I will say this, that for some of you who are listening, maybe you haven't been the volcano, but you've been on the other end of a volcano, and you've actually been holding on to that pain and not processing it because you wanted to protect somebody's craziness or intensity. And I'm calling, because I would say, in that situation, Abby, you were the survivor. You were the survivor of my insanity of that moment.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of survivors, like we'll put kind of a lens on the people who are in the pain, who've done the destructive behavior, but we forget about the actual survivor as well. And it's key for the survivor on the other end of those experiences to go, no, it's necessary that I get open about what I felt about that and what I experienced. And I don't have to protect the person that just got crazy with me.
Right.
I have permission to actually go have an open dialogue about that.
Totally. Which is, I mean, like, I didn't know how to do that because I didn't know how to do that as a kid. As a kid, it was the same thing. I have to protect my mom's life at the expense of my emotions. So I did that with you too. I have to protect your emotions at the expense of mine. And, but I think that I want to just say,
I want to add something to this because I think it's some of my keys.
Okay.
After that moment happened and that got out, that was a great starting point to get it out. But then there was like the days that followed where I had to start choosing life. Abby talked about the mental ruts being rebuilt, but it began, I remember a few days later,
me screaming, I don't want to die. I choose to live. I choose life. I'm all alone in the house. I'm just screaming, I choose life. I look like a madman, of course, but, and I'm like, I want to live. And there was something that I had to begin to buy into life. Yep. And I remember me fighting the voice of powerlessness. And I remember saying, I can do something about this. My life actually can change. I'm not powerless to these experiences. I'm not powerless to these voices. And there was this screaming over and over of the reality that I could actually take my life back. I remember screaming, I am not alone. I am not alone. And it was the reality of me buying in to the truth that there is love available. There were so many people that could have been available for me to love on me had I reached out. And I had to break through the isolation. And that, again, we're talking about whether it's suicide, depression, hopelessness, all of it. Again, there's a reality that there are people available that love you all around you.
Yeah. I think also there's this thing of, I was able to, in my personal journey, learn the process of pain, because I was stuck in pain. Growing up, I was trapped in it and I was traumatized in it. But I actually was able to learn how to actually, there's a way to get through it, because here's the truth. You're going to go through hard things the rest of your life.
Pain is a reality of the human experience. And so I try to, one thing I want to paint for people is you're in a common experience. Like if you feel alone because of the heartbreak you've been in, or because you feel abandoned, or because you feel unworthy, or because you feel hopeless, or because you can't see a way that your life is going to change, or because it feels like the walls are crashing in on you, whatever it is, that is a common experience. There are so many humans that experience the exact same thing as you. And not everybody. Like I know tons of people that never have experienced death like we're talking about. No.
But I also know tons of people who have. And so there's this idea that there are a lot of humans. You may not know them, or you might know them. You might be right next to them and not know that this is what's going on the inside of them. But so to understand it's a shared experience, and to know, I just want to give hope that there is a way that you can process emotions where you don't have to be under them. Where they don't, like, emotions bullied me for a lot of my life, and they dominated me. And I didn't know that there was ways that I could release bad ones and invite good ones into my world, so that I was getting to make choices, not so that I was getting pushed around by them.
Totally. And you can process them in ways that don't have to devastate the people around you. They don't have to bully you, and they don't have to bully others, which is a really big key. I think that going back to what I said, the key was choosing life. And it was actually a phrase that I wrote in my book. When there was a really difficult moment inside of the Tree of Life where, I'm not going to give it away, but there was this really difficult moment. And at some point, the trees in this orchard had to choose life. They have to choose. Are they going to live? Or are they going to die? Are they going to listen to accusation or hope? Are they going to, And so, And so that's something that, like, wherever you're at, the one thing that you have is the power of choice. Whether or not you even are suicidal, or you just have emotions. Like, what am I going to choose today? What am I going to choose to believe about myself? What am I going to choose to believe about the world around me? And really, when I decided to take my power back, or believe that I had power, is when something about life started to become real. Like the essence of life. Oh, I can be happy, and I can have fun, and I can get back my childlike wonder, and my history of pain as a child can be redeemed and restored, and I can re-experience life right now with Abby and friends in a way that maybe I didn't get as a kid, and it can all be redeemed. And not only that, I can bring that redemption to other people, and I can actually see beauty created from the ashes that was made in my life. And so one of the things is I started to learn how to be partners with happiness, partners with joy. Like they became friends. So like the same way that death had been a friend, you began to be friends with joy and life. And I started searching out, like, what is beautiful around me, instead of meditating on all this negative, horrible stuff that I'm never going to be seen and no one's going to care. I started going, who does care about me? Where are the moments people have cared about me? Not only now, but I started going through my history and going, where did they love me all along the way? Where did they give me their time, their attention that I was blind to in the darkness of my mind? And I started seeing a whole history. I'm like, oh my God. there are people that radically loved me. Now, maybe I didn't get it in certain ways that were necessary in my near vicinity.
Yeah.
There are people that were trying to love me. And when I could see that historically I had love there, I was like, that wasn't actually hopeless.
Yeah.
I was just blind. And I remember praying a prayer at one point. I was like, God, heal the blindness that I have to love. Yes. I've been blinded to love. Heal the blindness that I have towards love. And I remember all of a sudden having aha moments of what love practically looked like through other people. Mm-hmm. And so I started gathering those moments, and suddenly my life wasn't unimportant. It actually had value. I wasn't all alone.
Yeah.
And I started creating a history in my mind.
Yeah.
Of my reality.
I think for me, one of the things that I had to work on, because I still have physical problems and physical suffering.
Yeah.
And so I had to be like, what is good about being on the planet Earth?
Yeah.
What is good about this place?
Beautiful.
Yeah. And
especially when America's burning up right now.
So I had to recognize that love in the midst of suffering is one of the most beautiful things that you can experience.
Yep.
And you don't get to experience that. I mean, I don't know. We get that in this life.
Yeah.
Because there's a level of suffering, the choice to choose love, the choice to choose hope in the midst of this suffering, I think is one of the most incredible experiences for us, and creates, I think, a resounding sound on the earth of hope and love for other people. And my yes to life, I feel like we're much more connected than people are aware of. And I feel like my yes to life helps echo a yes to life for the people around me. And, and that it does actually matter. And I think, if you've struggled with depression, we just want to say, really, you matter.
Yeah. You're not alone.
Your life matters. I have been in that place where I'm so broken. I'm never going to get out of this. And seasons change.
Yeah.
I know it can feel especially with emotional,
forever. It's always going to be this way.
Especially with emotional flashbacks. Yeah. They remind you of something that happened from your childhood. So then you really do feel like it's been happening forever.
But it hasn't. Life has totally changed, moved on. Life is much better than it was.
Well, I mean, it doesn't mean it's much better than it was. Some people's life is harder than it was. But I'm just saying, it's a lie that this is what it will always be.
Sure.
Is what I'm trying to say. It's a lie. And all of the things I thought weren't possible. I didn't think it would be possible for me to laugh uncontrollably and for me to not be worried or for me to not be self-conscious or whatever. It is possible because I'm living it. I feel so much hope. I'm not overly serious and overly self-conscious, and I'm not locked in that dungeon inside anymore. And death feels more foreign to me now.
Yeah, it really does.
So I just wanted to say that as hope. It has been process, and I've had to go after healing, but it works and it is worth it. And I just wanted to, I actually wanted to take a minute to pray for people struggling with any of the things that we've covered, because us encountering love so dramatically pulled us out of dark places, each of us, that I would love to be able to pray for that for people who are struggling.
And before you do that, I want to say this. If you identify with any of this podcast, and that doesn't mean you have to feel suicidal. It could be, I feel really heavily depressed and powerless to that and alone.
Yeah.
Or there's just something that I feel trapped inside and I don't feel seen in it. And as Abby said, you're not alone. And I want to say I'm really sorry for the places where it's felt overwhelming, difficult. I'm sorry for the places where you feel powerless. I'm sorry for the places where you don't feel equipped to know how to change life and get out of where you're at. And I just know that you're going to begin to experience hope. As you just begin to say yes to the idea of
yeah, I'm open to the possibility that this can change, and I'm open to love breaking into spaces and resolving some of this, that it's actually going to change. It's going to shift things for you. You're going to experience life. Life is going to break through. Even as you're listening to me talk right now, you're going to begin to feel something's going to start hitting you where you're like, I feel the possibility of life breaking in. I feel some sort of goodness around me. Like goodness is beginning to almost encapsulate you. Some of you are going to start feeling like, I don't know, it's weird. It feels like I'm in a capsule of goodness. I don't know. That's the best way I can describe it. But life is breaking into your world right now. Lies that have been existing in your life about you, about your future, about your past are going to begin to shatter. Confusion that you've had about the world around you and your circumstances is going to begin to dissipate. You're going to begin to hear a higher level of truth as you're listening to this. You're going to feel truth break in. You're like, oh, before I believed this was truth over here, but it's all been a lie. I can see truth. I can see the way, the path. I can see a light breaking through into the darkness, and I can see where there's something saying there is hope for tomorrow. There is a better life that you can experience. And there are going to be some of you that are going to feel like you're breaking out of your own personal hell in the weeks to come, and you're going to start feeling it dissipate.
So, God, we invite your unconditional love to come wreck people's hearts. That every place where they felt alone, where they are in pain that feels like it's too much for them, that they don't know what to do with it, every place where they feel shame or hopeless or afraid or trapped, God, we ask right now that your love would come crashing in, that you would wreck people's hearts with your love, that what torment has felt normal would all of a sudden be wrecked, that it would be like, oh no, that's not normal. Love is normal. We ask God that your love would become the new standard of what life could be, because people would feel such an encounter right now with the presence of love. We just release over you. You are loved. You are chosen. You are significant. You matter. There is a purpose for you being alive on the planet right now. Your purpose is not up. There is hope for a good future for you. There is hope that things can change, that where you see no way, where you see like there's not a way how this can change. I can't imagine how it could look different. I can't imagine feeling different than it feels now. We release over you eyes to see that you don't have to know the how. You don't have to see how it is going to change, but change is possible. We release you from having to figure it all out and having to be in control. And we release you to actually feel a river of grace carry you out of the old into the new.
Suffering is going to shatter right now to places inside of your heart and your mind where you felt this suffering that you couldn't escape. Suffering is going to break right now. It's going to begin the breaking process, and you're going to begin to transfer out of suffering, and you're going to feel more at home outside of suffering. I see this place where some people have lived going, but it feels like home to be in suffering. It feels comforting to be in suffering. It feels normal. I couldn't imagine a life outside of it. It's not going to feel comfortable anymore. It's not going to feel like the place like that I knew for so long in my mind, where suicide felt like my normal. It felt like home to me almost, but I broke out of it. And you're going to begin to break out of it as you feel this essence of life hit you and love overtake you. You were created with a purpose. There is a God, a friend, a father that is deliberately involved inside of your life and wants to break down the door of your house and come inside your heart and go, I am here to bring love, infuse love and life inside of your world. So God, I just thank you for every person who's listening right now as they're hearing us pray over them. I thank you for their life. I thank you that there was a divine purpose for them, that there was divine intent when they were created, and that there is something to experience here on earth for them. It's not just about suffering. It's about experiencing a vibrant life. And I release the truth that even though there may be suffering, because life has suffering inside of it, that there's so much more, and you're going to experience the so much more.
Yeah, we ask God that people's eyes would be open and their hearts would be opened to be able to receive the beauty that is happening around them, where pain has actually closed their eyes and they've been shut off, that they would actually begin to have the capacity to experience the joy of life around them. And right now we silence the voice of suicide and death. We break your agreement with it. We actually say, you don't have to be friends with suicide and death anymore. You don't have to be bullied by suicide and death. You don't have to be bullied by depression. You don't have to be bullied by anxiety. We break off the place where it feels like I just have to be friends with them. And we ask God that for everybody who would like to step out, that you would actually come and grab their hand and walk them away from the friends that they'd had. And we shatter the voice of shame that would keep people isolated, that would keep people feeling like they have to carry this weight on the inside, that they're more broken than everybody else, that if people could see what they actually looked like, that they wouldn't be loved, that they'd be rejected. We ask that there would be a freedom all of a sudden where people feel safe enough to share the inner places that are so in so much pain and in so much secrecy, that you would begin to help them give a voice to what is inside.
Yep. So God, I just thank you that people who would maybe have had to go to volcanic eruptions aren't going to have to do that now. That love, as it breaks in, is going to gradually bleed it out so that they don't have to destroy other people around them in the process, and that they could actually just gradually go, oh, this is here. And I thank you that as love breaks in, shame breaks away. Yeah. That the power of shame doesn't have a place in the presence of love, that shame is going to break so that your mouth can open and you can share your heart and no longer feel the lie that you are all alone.
And we ask that your father and mother heart, God, would come and father and mother and comfort all of the children who are in pain, who need comfort.
Yeah. So
you are worthy of love, and you have a father who wants to be close to you and wants to walk with you and carry you out of this. Mm-hmm. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I had one more thing I just wanted to say. We're going to make it real easy for you. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I've never told somebody about my depression or my anxiety or my shame or my self-hatred or my suicidal thoughts or my self-harm, whatever it is, we are posting Justin's blog. It'll be on Instagram and Facebook again this year. And we have this episode. And so if you don't know how to broach this subject, share that with a friend and then say, can I tell you about how this impacted me? Yeah. Or can I tell you about my story? This is his story. Can I tell you about mine? Yeah. It's just an easy way to open the door, take some of the pressure off of you, to have it be about someone else, and then say, I want to share with you about me.
Yeah. And lastly, this is an episode like this. If you're still listening after all that, this is something that needs to be shared. Not because, it's this month, Suicide Awareness Month. We want to get the word out. We want to share it with friends and family and stuff, because we just actually want an open door to a dialogue where people could go, hey, that episode I listened to, there's been a little bit of that going on inside of me.
Yep.
So if you don't battle it, at least share it with friends and family and go, hey, I don't know if there's anyone in our world that's going through this, but we should all listen to this this month, because we want to save lives. Yeah. And we want to get people out of the darkness and into the light. So that's our hope for doing this, and why we vulnerably chose to share this episode the way that we did. And, there may be more conversations around this in the future, and we didn't cover everything. There's a million things we could cover on this topic, but we're just beginning here in this space so that the dialogue can get opened up around it.
Yeah. And if you are listening to this and you're like, I need to reprogram, I need to learn how to look at life differently, we do our Living Fully Alive course. We're doing it in January. We do it once a year. And the whole goal of that is to help people connect to love and rewire their brain and their emotions and their system so that they can actually be thriving, not surviving. I spent so much of my life just surviving, but there's a way out. And so if you're listening and you're like, I need practical help, make sure you talk to people. That's the first thing. And there's so many help. There's so much you can do to get help.
Tons.
I just wanted to also offer this. It'll be in January. If you want information, you can email
LFA.
So Living Fully Alive, LFA at gmail.com.
Nope. At Stumball
stumvalconsulting.com.
Oh, that makes sense.
LFA at stumvalconsulting.com. And you can just say, hey, just put me on the list of information if you want or need it. And so we just throw in that invitation.
Yeah, we want to just as many options as possible for people.
So go get help. Go be honest.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us.
Go tell people your stuff.
Go team.
Go team.
Bye now.
Go team.